Well, welcome to all to a fresh new week and a fresh Monday and a fresh Jude Collins. And I assume that you're not too stale yourself, Pat. Yeah.
No, not really. No, it's I noticed it's a bit cooler this morning, Dr. Collins. But anyway, no, it's we're moving along sort of nicely into the 2025. By the way, we mentioned this on Friday, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're now officially into spring, aren't we?
Aye, with Bridget. Bridget, but that's only Ireland, you know. I know.
Yeah,
I think that's a Celtic myth myself. They make it a
yeah,
big thing. Although I did notice a stretch to yesterday evening. It was beautiful. It was about
yeah,
5:30 before
yeah,
the sun went down, or at least the darkness
yeah.
to us. Um, you see that last week, Pat, I was just thinking, maybe this was relates to something we're going to talk about later on, but you complimented me on my attitude to age. You remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, we'll talk about that later on. Talk about that later on. Okay, there's two little stories in the Irish Times, and one's by
Yeah.
or about Mark Durkin, and the other is about Heather Humphreys. Um, Mark Durkin says there's a John Hume-sized hole in the conversation about a united
Yeah.
Ireland. Did that make sense to you when you read it?
No, I'm not sure that I did, but I was reading, and I didn't get a chance to read it in depth, but I read it.
Mm,
And I think the point I took out, Mark, and I have noticed that myself. There's almost two different languages in the north,
mm,
as you well know, Jude. What do you call it? Mark said, for instance, that unionists will not use the word reconciliation because they say that's a Fenian word or a
aye,
Republican word, and they won't use the word equality because. And I did always notice that a lot of things people could come at them, like unity and about Britishness and Irishness, come
yeah.
at it almost like 180 degrees different. And Mark, I noticed he was talking about Trumbull, and he said he could never read David Trumbull. He never knew where his head was at. Will he walk off today, or will he stay? Will he agree to this? Will he not agree? He says Hume took the view that half a time, the glass half full when it came to Trumbull, and he says for some reason that sort of worked. But Jude,
Mm.
I always noticed, I remember for years saying, "Jesus, no, we could look at the north, and we're only a small group of people. We could look at the same thing. We could see it from a totally different perspective, depending on your identity."
Well, it's a good point. That is a point that's worth stressing. It's not always that people are just trying to be sly and to slide away from what was signed up to in the Good Friday Agreement. I think people have got genuine fears. And I remember the time that Bobby Bala was talking about it. The idea of United Ireland was being thrown around then. Now, this was about at least a decade ago. And he said, could we
Yeah,
not come up with some other term that won't be a trigger for unionists? Like a United Ireland is a
yeah,
trigger word. And he says, an
yeah,
agreed Ireland or a new Ireland or something like that. But it does seem
yeah.
to me if you say, oh, well, we mustn't have things like reconciliation or whatever the other word was, it's getting a
Equality.
bit ridiculous, really, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Jude, I remember for years. I'm trying to think of a clear example in my head. But I remember, if you said something. No, even something quite simple. The unionists could get very uptight about it,
Hmm.
and I think there's sometimes there were things that people just this thing like about a shared Ireland, a new Ireland. Even Jude, look at the um, Derry. If you call it Londonderry, you're saying you're a Protestant. Everything's about language.
Hmm.
You say it's Londonderry, you're saying you're a Protestant, you're a Unionist, and you're pro-British. If you're saying you're Derry, you're an Irish nationalist, and you're a Catholic,
Hmm. Hmm.
and you're pro-Irish. And I suppose we have to accept maybe the reality. There's a lot of people in the north who see themselves totally 100% British, and there's a whole lot
Hmm.
of people in the north who see themselves as 100%
Oh,
Irish.
yeah.
And that's all. That thing. Michael Martin can call it the shared island. Somebody else can call it United Ireland. Somebody else can call it a Great Ireland. No, it's all. But our language is in the north. Has been a battleground for many, many years.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean that's fair enough, and sometimes it's used where people are use language and are aware of using language because they don't want to upset the opposition or the people that they're with.
Yeah,
I know if I meet somebody and I'm not sure what they are, I try to be careful of not say something that might be treading on somebody's toes, and try to avoid sort of hot topics. but what? So I go along with Mark Durkin or whoever about that notion to talk in terms that are not maybe United Ireland, but rather a reconciled Ireland or a new Ireland or a whatever. But there's a danger there too, and that is, and it's in Mark Durkin interview or the comments he has to say in that article, and in the Heather Humphreys piece, and what she has to
Mm.
say. And in both of them, well, here's Mark Durkin's thing. There's the firm will of the nation in terms of securing the unity of the people of Ireland. But it then also goes on to say, I'm assuming he's talking about the Good Friday Agreement, that a united Ireland can only be by consent. I think that is bad kind of use of words. I think I
Mm.
don't I'm not insulted by it, but I just think it's very stupid because it's contrary to the Good Friday Agreement.
Yeah. Uh, But you look at even I had an American friend not that long ago, and he was sort of chatting, and I said, "Well, you can call this place Northern Ireland, the north of Ireland, Ulster, the six counties." And by the way, if I say everybody comes at everything as I'm saying earlier on, I know people in the Unionist community when Seamus Mallon used to say the north of Ireland used to go bananas. He can't even say the proper name of the place.
Mm.
And then I know Republicans who refused point blank to say Northern Ireland. They say the six counties
Yeah.
and so on. So language in this part of the world, and it's all and how do we get to these things that there's a sort of an agreement about the use of language? That's like, and Dorgan says there's a what is it? The John Hume size hole, and this whole thing, about the language. But yeah, by the way, just to go back to what you're saying, why do you think that use of language is suspect?
I see a suspect because it's getting us to this point where you have to have reconciliation before you can have unification. You've got to
Yeah,
have a majority of unionists wanting to be in a united Ireland before you can call a border poll. Now I think that's the road to disaster. Eventually, some Republicans will get fed up and say, this is ridiculous. We agreed to this in the Good Friday Agreement. We've agreed that whoever's in the majority in the north and the majority in the south will vote for it, and that's it. I mean, actually, that's such a big concession if you stop to think about it, because
yeah,
we're talking about Ireland here, and surely it should be the will of the Irish people rather than the way we've
yeah,
divided it up. But because of the situation with unionists, they have agreed to do that on in the Good Friday Agreement. I think that's as far as I'd want to go. And I think it's very bad for people to be talking about that we must have reconciliation before. Now, I'm not against reconciliation. I'm 100% behind it, but I'm not going to have it as a precondition of a border poll.
yeah.
Otherwise,
Yeah, there was a judge in the High Court, Richard Humphreys. He wrote a book, very good book actually, and he said, in fact, he had to go with Leo Varadkar. Leo Varadkar did an interview. I think it was with Eamon Malley, but I'm not 100% certain. Where he
hmm,
said you need a weighted majority for United Ireland, 2/3 or something. And Humphreys pointed out that under the Good Friday Agreement, it was 50% plus one. And he said, as well as that, there can be no sort of disparity. He says, if 50 plus one is enough to keep the union, 50 plus one should be enough for United Ireland. And
exactly.
that's where, so I take your point.
Oh, exactly. And the trouble is, that it's got to the stage where for you or I to say that, we're
Yeah.
almost in a minority. I mean, among nationalists, there are
Yeah.
many certain nationalists south of the border who say, sure, it's all right, that's okay, not
Yeah.
bothering,
Yeah.
don't be annoying people. Well,
Yeah.
let's get on with our lives, and isn't it good that Sinn Féin are focusing on housing and nothing else? Um,
Yeah.
I think that's very, very sort of one-sided thinking and very narrow view of what politics is about. Politics is about putting
Yeah.
bread and butter on the table, for sure, and housing and all the rest of it. But it's also such a thing as what we might call an external affairs matter. That is to say, the
Yeah.
unifying of our country. I mean,
Yeah. Well,
to
politics
think,
should also be about vision, about where we're going.
yes, exactly. And the very idea that that might be somehow stupid or rocking the boat or something, to talk about the fact that Ireland should be a united country that governs itself. I mean, come
Yeah.
on. Yeah, yeah, the words almost fail me. And I think that people like ourselves, Pat, have a public duty to say that as often as possible. That
Yeah.
this idea of reconciliation before you can have a border poll is for the birds.
That is ridiculous. In other words, we will have to wait to the
It,
year of Kingdom Come
it won't happen,
before,
yes.
like,
Yeah, just
yeah,
won't
and
happen.
as well as that, it's actually encouraging intransigence because basically it's saying as long as you don't agree, nothing's going to happen. So sure,
Yeah,
who's going to agree with and those sort of circumstances?
yeah,
Jesus,
yeah.
no, let's oppose this all the way.
Uh, let's move on briefly, very briefly, to the Heather Humphreys article. And it's headed, I think, if you're a rural TD, it's very hard as you can't be home at night. Um, what would your reaction be to that headline as a former editor?
Not a great headline, and it's not. And in fact, by the way, it doesn't reflect the story either. Heather Humphreys is an interesting character in the sense that she was plucked from obscurity by I think it's about 2011. She was very hey, Jude, there are backbench TDs and there's backbench TDs. She was as far back as she could. In fact, I don't think anybody outside of our own constituency knew her.
Hmm.
And for some reason, and but I think Fine Gael, no, I always think it's slightly West Party, and I think because she was a Protestant, because she was from a border
Of
county, and
course,
she brought in.
of
And by the way,
course.
she turned out to be a very good minister. Don't
Aye,
anybody
fair,
kid in. She's
fair enough.
she
Yeah,
was a woman of, but it's it was the thinking behind it. That was we have to go
exactly.
out there. But anyway, she was brought in, and then she I think I can't remember what's her first. But anyway, she was made minister for commemorations in 2016. You know,
That was
and
a clever
that was
move.
sending out. It was a clever move, and here's a Protestant minister from a border county in charge of the Republican celebrations and all that. So maybe it was a clever move on this part, but I also think the 2016 commemorations were seriously downplayed.
Oh.
That was really the founding. I can't remember a single item from 2016. Can you?
Another thing. I can remember things from
No.
1966
Yeah,
commemorations
yeah,
far more
exactly.
vividly.
Yeah,
And it's stuff on
yeah,
TV, for example. I remember that wonderful series they had about the history of Ireland. I
yeah,
think it was
yeah.
Robert Key's series on then.
Robert Key, yeah,
And
yeah,
Hugh Leonard wrote something, I think, about 1916 as well, a kind of a fictionalized version. Very,
uh,
my memory is very good for then, and my memory of 2016 is not very good. And she was appointed the minister. So while there was a good appointment in terms of her being a Northern Protestant, I don't think she made a very good job, or somebody didn't make a very good job, but
but here's Jude, to get back to the headline, there's a certain truth. You know, I knew Paddy Hart quite well, and quite a few back in the day, and they used to leave on a Sunday night, or not Sunday, Monday night, Tuesday morning, to go to Dublin, and they weren't back till sort of Friday. And that was the life of a rural TD. You
well,
would not,
Pat,
and you what?
go ahead. Sorry, go ahead. Finish what you're saying.
No, no. But the point about it was like the Dublin TDs could go home to their every evening, and the
Mm,
ones
mm,
around the
mm,
Peel could go.
mm.
But if you're from Donegal, it's a 3.5 hour journey, and back then, particularly during the Northern Troubles, so there was
Yeah,
a lot of other things going on. So I can understand a rural TD is a different life to sort of city TD. And
yeah.
it's a different way of living, and
Mm.
as well as Heather Humphreys, I'd say if she walked down the town, wherever she's somewhere, as a New Bliss or somewhere, like I'd say everybody knows her family, seed, breed, and generation. So
Yeah,
it's whereas if you're TD in Dublin, I'm sure if you put on a hat on you and you walked out the door, half the people wouldn't even know you.
yeah. Well, all I can say is my heart bleeds for them. I can see the difference between being a Dublin TD and a Donegal or even a Monaghan TD. And you're right, you'd have to spend a Monday to Thursday up in Dublin and then get your weekend at home, whether for family or local constituents or whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
you're getting paid for it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they're getting a handsome salary for that. They're getting a
Yeah,
prospect of more money. They'll have a very good pension if they can stay long enough. Uh, you know,
yeah.
I cannot find it in my heart to say I'm really sorry for you, Heather. I'm really sorry for you, Paddy. It must be murder, by the way.
Mhm.
Having to spend less time with your family during
What
the
is
working
dude?
week.
The camp. I didn't realize the camp Corliss on something like 280,000 a
Oh,
year.
stop there. God's sake.
Jesus Christ! And
She doesn't have to
uh,
even run next time, and she's got going to
yeah,
be paid as a TD
yeah,
higher than a TD. And then she'll
yeah.
have a fantastic pension at the end of that. No wonder Verona
Mm.
was falling over.
By the way, just now you mentioned, I don't think it was down for your on your things we may talk about. But there's been no agreement on that whole thing as regards speaking rights and all as we speak.
No, I know. And there's a danger that the same thing that happened last Wednesday will happen this Wednesday
Yeah,
as well. It seems that the opposition have really dug their heels in this time. I think Sinn Féin should be very grateful that they have such strong backing from Labour in particular and also from
yeah,
the Social Democrats, because that takes off this thing, oh, there's Sinn Féin, always the disruptor, always the critic. It's not that. It's an opposition now you're
yeah,
faced with, and it's given them experience of working together. And I think that is
yeah.
a good thing because that's the only way they can work.
I read there this morning. I was just before Mary Lou and Ivana Bacek, Sinn Féin and Labour
Mm.
leaders, have both said that this whole thing is a red line for them. It's not, they say, and that is a good point. They said this technical group, Michael Lowry is leading, want all the benefits of being in government and all the benefits of being in opposition. And you can't hunt with the hare and run them with the hounds politically in Ireland. And that's what's trying to, and it is a stroke, Jude. It is a stunt.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, in other words, we quite literally could have the farce of one Healy Ray brother asking another Healy Ray brother, one in government and one in opposition, asking each other questions while they both negotiated the thing for government, the program for government. That has taken a piss out of people.
I was thinking, and it just struck me, that there's a lot of concern in the States as to whether democracy will survive Trump, and the actions he's taking. And in fact, people will joke about it, but they'll be sort of slightly serious and say, we might have seen the last election in the United States. I don't think
Yeah,
it'll come to that, but there are questions about the future of democracy and the enemies it has. I think
yeah,
that this is an instance on a small scale, but a real one, of a dilution of democracy. The way
yeah.
parliamentary democracy works is you have a government and you have an opposition. And the job of the government is to govern, and the job of the opposition is to hold the government to account and,
Yeah, yeah.
to offer alternatives. Now, if
Mm.
you've got a cuckoo in your nest, that's
Yeah,
going to hobble you badly. I'm mixing my
yeah.
metaphors there, but
But even symbolically, it's important. You can't have people in government at at one stage and then jumping over to the other desk and then in opposition. Can you imagine Michael Lowry, because he's the leader of the technical group, a leader's question, having the right to ask the Taoiseach a question about some government program that he helped initiate? Like it's
But you see, I also think a lot of people, maybe the opposition are taking this in as well. A lot of people are very well aware of the fact that it was Michael Lowry who negotiated on behalf of or led the negotiations with Fine
yeah,
Gael and Fianna Fáil. And Michael Lowry does not have a good history in Ireland. Now, I
no,
know they love him down in
no,
Tipperary. They must do because they've returned him again and again for 40 years or
yeah,
something. But I mean, the
yeah.
fact of the matter is, there was a report on him. Was it the Moriarty Tribunal? And
Moriarty Tribunal, yeah,
they
yeah.
said bad things.
Yeah, he can't get away with it. Like he and Dennis O'Brien have dismissed the findings, but Jude, the Moriarty tribunal ran for quite a while. Now, it didn't find anybody guilty, but it
Hmm.
returned findings. It did a report, and they asked serious questions, and they made serious observations, including the fact that they said that basically Lowry had aided big time while a minister, Dennis O'Brien's securing of the third telecommunications license, which made O'Brien a very, very rich man. And you did raise questions about the funding of certain projects of Lowry's, like the building of his house, about a refrigeration company, if I remember correctly, and about some deals that he seemed to be facilitated with O'Brien. So, like, I don't know whether he's innocent or guilty, but that was the findings of the Moriarty Tribunal.
Isn't it sort of interesting that the Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil hold their nose when they're faced with the prospect of sharing power with Sinn Féin, but they've no problem with Michael Lowry, you
Yeah.
know? None at all. Never raised as a thing,
You
as a
see,
barrier.
he wears a shirt and tie and comes from the same gene pool.
Yes, he does look, he presents himself very well. He does look like a
Yeah.
refined gentleman. Okay, better
Mhm.
stop or I'll start using bad language. Let's have a word about Trump and his declaration yesterday. And apparently he's going to implement these almost immediately. 25% on all goods coming from Canada, 25% coming on all goods from Mexico, 10% on all goods coming from China, and he says definitely they'll have to do something with the EU. And Britain's we have good relations, but we'll still need to look at what is this man doing? What are you? How would you? Is he serious? Do you think, Pat?
No, Jude, I really genuinely don't know. Uh, Put it like this, the Canadians are taking them serious anyway, that's for certain. They have announced an immediate 30% or whatever it is on US imports. I think it's something like now it'll affect 155 billion. Whatever, one of the, I can't remember her name, a former deputy prime minister of Canada says the things about tariffs are they're lose lose. But Jude, here's the thing. Apparently, if America wants to, close the gap between what they're importing now and what that need to double production. So right now they need to import all these things. So if they're not going to import them, are they going to be able to double production in a year or something? I'm not sure. Some no, a lot of the analysts are saying this is going to start a trade war that could increase inflation, lead to recession, cause serious problems. So I don't know. But Trump, I heard him on a wee about 10:30 this morning on Sky. We're going to have to concentrate on ourselves. America has been taken for granted for too long, and we're going to make America great again. Has interfered right and left and centre. It has built military bases right across the world. Three or four or five of the biggest companies in the world are Americans. Your Microsoft, your no, you keep on thinking of Twitter and all the rest of it. America has gained massively from world trade, and I think American arrogance has got to Trump. Anyway, he says they don't, and he's chatting about the EU. He says they don't buy our cars. Well, the last I heard, Ford was an American company,
Yeah.
as is General Motors. So
Mm.
what the hell is that about?
But
So
you don't.
anyway,
You
it'll be
don't.
interesting to see. Now the EU, I would take it, Jude, if Trump tries to introduce tariffs, the EU is 500 million, biggest trading bloc in the world. They start hitting back at American goods. It's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I think well, maybe he knows what he's taking on, but I think if he follows it through and engages in a full-out trade war, I think, well, as in all these things, as with Brexit, for example, he will damage other countries, but he'll also damage his own country. And
Big time.
if he's so blind, his point is he thinks that the American people, he's told them they'll suffer for a wee while, but then, the golden age, the sun will come up. So that sounds
Mm.
exactly like Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson
Yeah.
said, we would have this golden new sunny uplands that would be emerging, but a wee bit of
Uplands,
suffering first. And
yeah.
meanwhile, how long is it now since the Brexit? And there's not a sign of a sunny upland to be seen. And
Jude, I don't know how true it is, but I read something there quite recently. They're real concern in certain quarters about the British economy. Real, and our friend Keir Starmer is out today in Brussels, I think, meeting the 29 other leaders,
that's right.
and it's clear that he wants to reset relationship. Jude, Trudeau said that they wrote it down. What they say that 155 billion in tariffs on US goods starting forthwith, and this includes peanut butter, beer, wine, lumber, and other ancillary products.
Mm.
The other one of the things I remember reading, a lot of these precious metals that the Americans need come from Canada. And if the Canadians start sort of saying, right, no, we're not,
Hmm.
so yeah, there's a negotiating tactic. But you see, I don't think Trump's that smart. I've never believed that. This guy, The Art of the Deal. Dude, he
Aye.
didn't even write the bloody book. There's another. It was ghostwritten by another guy. So this thing that he's the smart guy that wrote the deal, bollocks. He did not.
Well, maybe Pat, maybe give fair to the guy. He could have been off doing other deals and paid the guy to go and write the story for him. Uh, that I
Yeah,
wouldn't fault him too much on that, but yes, I'd agree with you when it comes to him overselling himself in terms of being a deal maker.
yeah,
If this is his idea of a deal, he's doing it the wrong way because even as he slapped 25% tax on tariff on Canada. He called on it again on Canada to become the 51st state of the United States. And I told them how wonderful it'd be for them. Does he have any idea? I mean, I have personal experience of this because when I went to Canada first, I thought of Canada as being kind of an adjunct of the US. It was they're all
mm,
Yanks. And in fact, I remember people when Canadians would come through here, or friends of mine, and they would meet Irish people. The Irish people would talk later on about, oh, that Yankee boy you had with you.
Mm.
They tended not to differentiate. The Canadians differentiated, I'll tell you. There was no way.
Oh.
In fact, a lot of them really didn't like um, Americans, US citizens very much. I remember the time of, I think it was Bush, certainly it was
Mhm.
pre our good friend, what's his bloody name,
Mhm.
Trump. Uh, well before Trump, he used to refer to, he lived in Vancouver, and he used to refer to the madhouse next door. And he was
Oh.
referring to the United States. I mean, his, no, does he must have some plan in saying this, because no country is going to give up its sovereignty just like that, and especially Canada ain't. Why do you
No,
think he's saying
in
that?
fact, there's a 91-year-old former Canadian, I think it's John Christian or Christian, I can't, Chrétien or something like that. Anyway, he wrote an article on the Globe and Mail, I think it is called, the big paper
Yeah.
in Canada, there about 2 weeks ago. And he basically said Canada is a very different country to America. They have their own culture, their own rules, their own regulations. He says we have built a tolerant country. We don't believe in the same guns the way the Americans do. We don't believe in all the rest of it. And so, and he basically said he didn't use the words, but he's basically said in a very nice way to Trump, the second word was off, and so I think the Canadians, and I think the Canadians did really resent this sort of thing. By the way, Jude, I remember
Well, who
hearing
wouldn't?
what was the definition of a Canadian? A nice American. Or sorry, basically you have a different. If you want to meet a definition of sort of meeting a Canadian, they're the nicer version of the Americans.
Well, they do tend to be very courteous. You getting onto a bus, the guys driving the bus will say, "Good morning, how are things going?" It's sort of similar in a way to, I notice in Dublin when you get off the bus,
Mm.
a lot of people say thank you to the driver as they get off.
Yeah,
I mean, I
yeah,
think little things like that, I mean, they're not hard to do, and they grease the wheels a wee bit for us. Um,
yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, I believe here's two things we haven't said about these supposed tariffs that they're putting on. One is they're having a dramatic effect on the market, stock market.
Yeah.
I would not be at all surprised if Trump and associates were using that fact to buy stock, and then Trump would come out with something positive, and the what was going down would go up, and these guys would make
Yeah.
several million. You ever
I
consider
take their profit in a way. Yeah, dude, nothing surprises me, in the sense, dude, I am. I keep saying this, and I know I say it in my own head. I'm going, but I would love to know what anybody finds attractive about Trump or why they admire him. I can't see it, and I think he's a despicable human being on every level I can think of, politically, socially, religiously, as a human being. There's nothing I can see to admire.
Yeah. Well, there's a
Uh, you
lot of
know,
people felt the same way about Maggie Thatcher, but maybe she was little bit a wee bit more polite. One of I said that it was a ruse to, make killings on the stock market. The second thing I have here, and it's a bit rude now, so if you're any of our listeners are of a gentle and sensitive disposition, put your fingers in your ears
position,
now.
yeah.
Is it a willy waving contest he's in? To show who's the big guy. I'm the big
Yeah,
guy.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
I
Because
think that's
he
what
did that with, remember North Korea? He did that about, he says, oh, I've got a bigger rocket than he's got it.
yeah. I do remember there's a famous meeting of several leaders where he was when they were going to take a photograph, he literally pushed other people out of the way to get to the front row. You
Yeah.
know, is some idea that he has to be the main man, that the focus. He just absolutely loves that strut that he has. It's
Mhm.
quite obviously a learned way of walking,
Mhm.
and the way he struts up and this. And apparently, he has modeled himself on Churchill, that he doesn't smile. He thinks this makes him look, like a real leader and all this. Like he's a moron. He's an absolute moron.
Well, he's a dangerous moron. That's the thing. Okay,
Yeah.
let's come to something much more sort of local in a way, really. There's an article in the Irish Times today talking about the sucking up that goes on. in the world of offices,
Yeah,
and they're saying there's a lot of sycophancy or sycophancy. Well,
yeah,
you're a man, Pat. You worked in a place with offices. Well, I did too, so I'll let you go first, and then
yeah.
I'll tell you. Did you see much of
Ah,
this in your
like,
time? Did you engage in
yeah,
much of this in your
of
time?
course. Yeah, you can see it right, left, and center. And it's, in fact, we were talking about Trump. I think the girl who wrote that said there was a guy was at the World Bank tried to do a sucking up to Trump. Remember the time President Trump, when we were here 5 years ago, we walked and you talked to all the people, and halfway through the interview, and then he said someone that Trump took offense at, and suddenly he blew him out of the water. Sycophancy, Jude. Jude, we've all seen it, even at school, the wee boy, it sucks up to the teacher. You must have seen that, and so on. I've seen it then at secondary school, that, the one, at sycophancy in the office is rife. The one, hey, sir, mister, would you like a cup of coffee? And, all the rest of it. And, I presume it's a way of life. Lots of people do it.
Without naming names, was that you experienced that yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I did too. Two institutions. Well, I worked in several institutions at high school level and at the university level, and then I was around the BBC a lot. To be honest with you, at high school level, I didn't see so much of it. Well, I suppose there was some of it, all right. At university level, it was rampant. There were people who carved out their careers by sucking up to the boss at a rate which was just, honest to God, it was breathtaking. Um, and in the BBC, I remember on one occasion in the BBC, Radio 4 was over making some sort of program, I suppose it was about the North here, and they needed some piece of information. And I was involved in it in a marginal way. So I went off and I got this piece of information from them, which was quite important. So I was coming in with the information. And this young one she was Irish actually, um, said to me, what, have you got that information? I said, yeah, I'm going in here to give it. She said, no, I'll take it in for you. And she
Mm.
took it in for me. And it was only afterwards I realized she did that deliberately. So she would be
Mm.
remembered as the person who solved the problem or brought the information
Yeah.
if it necessary. I mean, that's just one example. I thought that
Yeah.
was pathetic. But maybe you see, Pat, it's just playing on human nature. I said this thing to you about how you had complimented me on my way I lived my life. Uh,
Mm.
we all love to have nice things said about us. We all love to
Yeah.
have people admire us. And we just
Mm.
can't help ourselves. Even if we think they're telling lies, even if we suspect they've got ulterior motives, we still love it, and you don't forget it either.
Absolutely, yeah. I was in a certain situation quite recently. I'm not going. It's too obvious, so I'm not going to give the situation.
Right.
Where
Apart from
the
the
guy in
names.
charge, I was chatting to him, and anyway, and there's another young lady present, and I was chatting to the man about a certain sort of political situation, and I know for a fact that the girl had no interest in it. But suddenly she said, because her boss sort of said, "Hey, Pat, I must get that book," and she said, "I'd love to get that book as well." And it was just a wee simple thing, dude. But I was saying, you have about as much interest in what we're chatting about, but you're sucking up to the boss. And
Yeah.
dude, like, I've been in situations too. I remember one time. Uh, uh, I'll be careful how I said this one as well.
Yeah.
We were looking for a certain employee, and I happen to know a guy, and I rang him up and I said, "Hey, do you fancy a job?" And we chatted a wee bit and what's the money like and all the rest of it. So I told another person, and before I got even a chance, she had rang the managing director to say, "Look, I've got this guy for this," and he was going, "Oh, well done," and all the rest of it. But I mean, his sister, the final incident I can remember, she was a nurse. And one day there was something wrong with a patient and whatever. And my sister, who apparently was quite a good nurse in a sense, and she says, "I think there's no X is wrong with that woman."
Hmm.
And she said it to another sort of junior nurse. And the first thing, before even she had the words out of her mouth, the other guy was running down to the sister saying, "Look, I think that," and apparently it turned out that exactly was what was wrong.
Oh,
It was something to do with pregnancy. I don't remember the details, so no point. But anyway, and the sister then said it to the doctor, and he's going, "I think you could well be right." So there was this young junior nurse getting all the kudos. And apparently, and I've never, by the way, I heard that from my sister secondhand, not from her directly. But apparently, she said she learned never to say anything in front of your woman again. You know?
Well, it's you could look at it positively, I suppose, and say this is a person who wants has ambition and they know how to get there, so they're going to do this, and say, well, that's fair enough. On the other hand, you could say people should be promoted on merit rather than stealing other people's ideas and passing them off as their own. And
Yeah,
I think that's sort
yeah.
of really useless. Okay, only a minute left, Pat. I want to remind our viewers and our listeners, I'm talking to you, yes, you, not Pat, but you. I want you to hit the button subscribe. Is there a subscribe button at the bottom, Pat? Tell me, and yours.
I don't know, Jude, you're the man, you're the techie, you're not me.
Well, all
Uh,
right. If there's no subscribe button, guys, would you write in and let me know? And I'll make sure a subscribe button is put there. And secondly, send us in comments and information or ideas for talking about stuff. I know we've said this before, but I think it's really important. And I must say, I tell you, I read every single message. Pat McGart doesn't bother, but I look at every single one of
and on that note,
them. Okay. I didn't mean
good
that,
luck,
Pat.
Jude.
I didn't mean it. Don't be crying, Pat. Don't be crying.
As if I
Okay.
care.
All of
Good
it.
luck.